Welcome to the Live Wildly podcast, a space where we explore how to live our wildest expressions while nourishing our hearts. Here we come together to share about our life paths, authentic expressions, and heart's wisdom with one another. We cover all things motherhood, spirituality, adventure, health and wellness, and more. I'm your host, Olivia Ashley, a mama, intuitive, and seeker of a joyful, inspired life. Let's dare to live wildly together. Welcome back, lovelies. I am really excited for this episode today, and I'm gonna try and do my best to keep this intro short and sweet because it is a longer episode, and yet it is chock full with great information, and I'm really excited for you to listen. Before that, if I can just give a mini life update check-in, I am really excited by this full moon in Aquarius. My moon is in Aquarius, and it just feels right. I feel energized, motivated. Let's get it done. Let's get creative, knock these things off my to-do list. I'm so curious how you all feel with this Aquarius full moon. And typically, I always feel the effects, usually heavily, the day after the full moon. And I'm recording this intro on Tuesday. This episode comes out Wednesday. So it is actually the full moon at its heightened peak right now. And I'm also excited that we're moving into Leo season. It's August. It just has that like crisp summer vibe. We're gonna near fall soon. There's 2 more months of summer. You know, we're at that point. We're, I think, almost exactly, if not exactly, between summer and fall. And this time last year, I was heavily pregnant, just wondering how long I was going to be pregnant for, and still having like 6 weeks plus to get through. And it's fun to reminisce and look back at those morning walks and how I was feeling. And yeah, wow, it's just, I love this time of year. I am not a huge fan of the heat, and yet this summer has been relatively mild for Colorado, and I have just been taking it in stride and loving my everyday walking challenge endeavor, and that has been really inspiring. I think I'm on day 65, and it blows my mind that I'm gonna do it for like 300 more days and post about it, and it's just fun. I'm curious to see what else this sparks, and I hope it motivates you. Join me, hashtag Let's Walk Wildly today. Please share you walking outside. You don't have to do it every day, but I'd love to see the community and my listeners getting out there, being inspired, sharing where you walked and how that is for you. And overall, life is feeling good. It feels like we're in this foggy mist of unknowns. Like I feel like we're waiting to reach that brink of fog, if I can throw it to a Frozen similarity of where they're stuck in the forest in the mist of fog and Frozen 2, and they're just kind of trapped and they can't really get out, and they're finding their path, and this is their journey. And then like when they like accomplish this and they figure out that one piece, the fog lifts and they're like, okay, next part of our journey, let's step out and continue. And that is really the vibe and what I'm receiving a lot right now. I am really feeling called to take more time to check in, to just restart some practices, going into the Akashic records for myself more, and meditating and just checking in. It's so hard. I don't know if you also feel this way sometimes or can relate, but especially as a parent, I just have such little time by myself or to connect or feel in and how am I feeling. And I feel like I'm a very aware person, and this is really important to me, so I probably do it a little bit naturally, but it's felt like at this moment in life it's been absolutely necessary. So something that was really fun that I prioritized this week, it just kind of lined up, was lots of self-care. Typically I used to do monthly, where I'd go do a float tank and a sauna and a yoga and just have this beautiful day of replenishment, nourishment, and we would do that monthly. And that was pre pandemic. So things shifted. That business actually closed. And y'all, if you're in this area around like Castle Rock, south of Denver, if you know any really good float tanks or spaces, hit me up, DM me, please let me know, because I would love to find one down here. Or if you have any other modalities that you would recommend for me to check out, like a salt cave, I've done them, or, anything, acupuncturist, I'm all ears, because I am really feeling called to step up my physical health game, even though I feel like I'm doing pretty good. But anyways, what I did this week was we got a couples massage, so recommend. Date night, heck yeah, we were blissed out, went and got some food after. It was delicious. Our body just felt so good. And then I got to the chiropractor. I did a really juicy yoga class at a local studio and the sauna blanket. So I'm feeling replenished. And then the other piece that I've been really noticing and feeling is listening to the herbs and listening to the plants and instinctively choosing the ones that I feel I need right now. Right now, nettle has been really, really calling me, and this is a great herb for really everyone. It's going to support your body systems, but especially women. It's very high in minerals. It's really helpful, especially in building blood, and it's just a lovely, earthy, grounding, replenishing plant. And then the other one I've been having is burdock root. And I actually, off the top of my head, don't know as much about it, but I do know it helps support with women in pregnancy, blood building. It has really high antioxidants. It can help remove toxins from the blood and help skin issues. So there's just so much there. And I've been realizing that I think I have really low long-term iron stores. So I recently learned this. You have short-term iron stores and you have long-term iron stores. And I've struggled with anemia all through my childhood into my pregnancies. I really struggle with brittle nails, low energy, like my heart does weird things here and there. And I'm finally connecting it to iron. And so I'm going to share more later on around some diet things my husband and I might be undertaking based on some inspiration from a neighbor and some books that we've read, and just wanting to deeply replenish my body. And I think that's going to come through meat. So I'll drop that nice little hint there. I love plants. I love herbs, everything in moderation, but I do feel like there is this deep need to replenish our bodies, check in with our minerals, detox a little bit, cleanse. And yeah, that is where my head is at going into the end of the summer. We're halfway through summer, nearing fall, and I'm just so excited for fall. I don't know why. It's just, when I'm being in the moment, I'm living in the present, but there's this like magical pull that I'm feeling towards the fall season, which is so interesting. I'm not quite sure, but again, I'm curious when this mist will lift and where we'll be headed and what we will find out. So stay tuned. And to prep you for this episode, let's get you ready. This is my dear friend, Abbie Massey. I met her through Sahara Rose's Rose Gold Goddesses. We were both a part of that group for a good while, the community, and I really loved it. I love Sahara Rose and all the work she's doing. Shout out to her. And this connection, she was the one person I met and was local, and we got together, and she has just been super supportive, so kind, and we both are from Minnesota, which is always a fun Midwest connection. Abbie is a teacher, a educator, a coach, an astrologist, and she really just is living her life to be her best whole self. She is really focused on supporting families, children, people in uncovering their passions, their authentic selves. And this episode really touches it all. It's a very well-rounded episode in the sense that it's going to give a lot of tips and support to especially you parents out there, you mothers. And if not, I think you'll still get a lot out of it. It is helpful. And it is kind of a high level on a lot of these things. So I'd love to bring her back and dive deeper into more specific areas. Hit me up and let me know what you liked, what you didn't like, what you want to hear more about, and we can definitely plan for it. So We're going to talk about tips to be your whole self and how to make change and be accountable and how you can use a coach for that. And then I get really open around my parenting struggles in terms of having picky eaters or battles or giving in to the whines and all those things that I think most parents struggle with, and tech time and how nature can help. So that we just riff on, and it's a great segment to help you and give you some really tangible tips and tools that you can apply into your life. And then we move into Stone's birth chart. So my youngest son's birth chart in astrology, she dives into it and gives me lots of highlights. She goes over elements, how you can have a dominant element in your chart and what that means and how to find it. We touch on Saturn returns, the full and the new moon, and just so much more. How you as a parent, or even just, again, if you're not a parent, you can use someone you love, so close friends, yourselves, look at your birth chart and really be able to learn and integrate some of it into your day-to-day to help support you. So I hope you enjoy. If you love it, please rate and review the podcast. I appreciate it. And share with any friends, mamas, whomever it might spark when you listen. So let's kick it to the episode. Enjoy, and we'll talk more soon. Hello, Abbie, and welcome to the Live Wildly podcast. This is so fun because we are doing this in person.
Yay! Thank you for having me.
You're so welcome. So this is getting to be extra special, extra fun. I think you all will get really excited about this episode and everything she has to tell us. So let's dive in, and why don't you tell us about yourself and your background and a little about your story?
Yeah, that's such a big question, but I am going to go back. I grew up in Minnesota as an only child, and I feel like I had a relatively happy childhood until about when I became a teenager. You know, my parents, I love them, but they modeled me more unhealthy patterns of interacting with one another. And then when I was a teenager, I just feel like I went through a lot with my own emotional life that I felt very isolated, but I always journaled when I was a child, and I feel like that was a really big thing that helped me through that time period. When I graduated from high school, I went to the University of Minnesota for my undergraduate and graduate degree. Originally, I started studying psychology, child psychology, and family social science, and I really wanted to dive into understanding myself and understanding families and those dynamics. And while I was studying there, I started working at the University of Minnesota's Child Care Center, and that was a really positive experience, and I loved working with the kids. So for graduate school, I decided to get my master's in early childhood and early childhood special education. And I met a really good group of girlfriends who were also doing the program with me at the time. And that was really fun. And I'm still friends with some of them. But they were all in relationships. And during that point in my life, I did not have a relationship. And I felt like as my time in graduate school was coming to an end, nothing was keeping me in Minnesota. And it was time for me to move on to a new place. I kind of felt that calling from the universe. So my cousin was living in Colorado at the time, and so I went out to visit her. We had been really close when I was a kid. She is about 4 years older than me, so when she started high school, I was in about 5th grade, and we kind of drifted apart at that point in our life, but she's a really important relationship to me. So I ended up moving in with her out here, and we got to reconnect, and so that was really lovely. When I moved out here, I started working in education, and I worked at Dearborn Public Schools in early childhood and special education. And I also just was able to, explore my social life all by myself, far from home, which was something I didn't spend quite as much time doing in my undergraduate at college. I was really focused on my studies, and I didn't really find a sense of belonging in undergrad. And so out here, I felt like I took that time to really explore and did traveling. Went to Guatemala and Peru. And then when I was about 26, 27, I think I was going through my Saturn returns, my first Saturn return. I found out that my aunt was dying, and that was a big pivotal shift in my life. And I went home to see her and visit with her, and I had a lot going on in my career too at the time. You know, I've always loved working with kids, but part of public school, I was working in a position where I was being really micromanaged, and I had a lot of stress going on. And when I came home and after my aunt passed, I also had some family dynamic things going on, just a lot to deal with. And I ended up also getting sick with candida and thrush in my mouth, and the doctors did not know what was going on, and they didn't really know how to help me. You know, they just gave me antifungal. Originally, they thought it was just anxiety, and so I really dived into trying to figure out what was going on with me and looking into health. And at the same time, I started going to a Buddhist temple and meditating and taking classes on meditation. So it really shifted me, and I became a lot more internal and just started, I feel like, on my spiritual path. I eventually figured out what was going on with me, and with a lot of dietary shifts, and was gluten-free, sugar-free, dairy-free, lots of things, and cooked exclusively at home, switched to whole food, organic lifestyle. And, you know, I feel like the health journey is still a journey that I'm on, but I am happy to have kind of woken up to that allowed me to wake up to just taking power in my own life and knowing that I can solve what's going on with me, even if I'm not feeling the support from, you know, the mainstream doctors. And yeah, so then continue to stay on the path of meditation. And even when I ended up, you know, leaving studying with the Buddhist temple, still continued on my spiritual path and dove more into my chakras and to different things like that. I met my current partner in 2016, and we live here in Castle Rock with my stepson and our dog, our cat, our chickens, all of our animals. You know, and I feel like I went back to education in our school district here, but I was just missing like the inspiration. I felt like I was doing all the day-to-day stuff, taking care of my body, my family, but I was looking for something to just feel inspired by, and that's what led me to astrology. And I was really just felt passionate for the first time in a long time, and I've been investigating that ever since, and it's just been this awesome vehicle for propelling me further on my path and purpose.
That's beautiful, and there's so much there. And I have to shout out Minnesota because it was so funny when we connected that I was born in Robbinsdale, Minnesota, which is where you, Abbie, grew up. And I thought that was hilarious because you said you had never met anyone else who had been there, but there I was. And, you know, there's so much there with spirituality and health. And I think the more I talk to people, especially in this realm, it's interesting how many of us go through these Saturn returns, dark nights of the soul, where we have to kind of re-find ourselves, that we're faced with something that it just throws us or makes us look at what isn't working in our life. And for you, you really found nutrition and astrology and coaching and also parenting with your stepson and everything like that. And so I'm just amazed, I think, by how much you've grown and just where you started and how you've been able to shift and also be so willing to help others. You're probably one of the most open-hearted, show up support others. And that, I think, is what allows you to be such a great astrologist, coach, all the things in your life. And so you blend them in your own unique way. And if we can start to touch some about life coaching, because I think a lot of people can really struggle with setting routines, or they have these lofty goals or New Year's resolutions, and then follow through is really hard. And so for someone looking to make holistic changes in their life, whether it's to just be and feel healthier, maybe start an exercise program, whatever that is, what areas would you have them begin with? Because that can be pretty big, but I loved that you really focus on the holistic part as well.
Yeah, and so my coaching really brings together what I did for myself to continue to grow and start to make those changes to make me a healthier, happier, more spiritual, fulfilled person. And so what's really wonderful about coaching is really we can begin wherever that person or group feels like they need it most. I've noticed through working with myself and others that if you're facing a struggle in one area of your life, it often reflects in other areas too, in different ways. But I do think, beliefs underlie a lot of that. So wherever a person is interested in starting to make a change is a great place to do that. And the goal is that we're just going to start living with more intention, being reflective, and making sure that you're working towards whatever your goals are, and that will ripple out into all the areas of your life.
That makes sense. So setting those goals, maybe even identifying values of your life. I think that's something that some people can say, I want to make this change, but they don't even know really what is important in their life too. But I love the intention setting. And you do such a good job with affirmations in your day to day. I think that can really help once you have that figured out. And I think something else that people struggle with, or at least I can too, is accountability and then consistency. For some reason, it's way easier if you have someone else, whether you paid for it, often you paid for it, or it's part of a program that helps you stick with it. But the consistency part too can be a real struggle. So how would you help someone who struggles in that area?
Yes, I think this is so common because I'm a big fan of Gretchen Rubin, and if you've ever heard of her, she's another podcaster, but she came up with something called the 4 tendencies, which looks at how people deal with inner and outer expectations. And maybe not surprisingly, but 70% of the population is what she considers an obliger, where they need support with inner and outer accountability. So to do whatever their expectations are, they need that outside person. So I think for whatever reason, that's just how people function. And maybe, from childhood, we were taught at school, you need to get these things done. We had that outer accountability from teachers and parents. And that is just really normal. And so as we become an adult and we are left with more time, we really could use somebody else to, one, prioritize what is it that I'm trying to do, and then know I'm going to talk to this person again, and that helps people move forward with their goals. So just knowing that is normal for a lot of people to need that accountability. And then with consistency and also with a good place to start, your life is often giving you that starting place with whatever is coming up for you. And that is depending on how I use astrology for this, depending on, are you a fixed sign where you like to do the same thing day after day? Or are you mutable where you need change? So what might work for one person might not work for another. And sometimes in your astrology chart, the focus is on career right then, or the focus is on family. So that can kind of help, and also just help you feel validated for what you're going through in your life. So I like to merge those two.
That's really helpful. And so I'm hearing we are kind of hardwired to have and need accountability. It's just how we grew up, and having someone to help push us towards. And I think having a life coach is just a great reflection point. But why do you think they're so popular right now? I feel like in the last 20 some years, it is just exponentially grown. Is this because we lack community, the willpower, education? What is that? Or what have you seen come up for you and your clients?
Yeah, I think when we reflect, we're starting to realize as a society that we are not as excited about our day to day as we wish we were. And when we look back with how the majority of people were raised, we were not encouraged to be reflective on what it is we're passionate about. And I think we're really returning to our authentic self and taking the time to say, what am I passionate about? What are my unique gifts? That, at least for me, wasn't something that was ever talked to me about when I was a kid. It was like, what makes you a lot of money? Or what is something that's stable? And so I think a lot of people have just gone into these different jobs that maybe are not fulfilling to them. And so we're stopping and saying, I need a shift. This is our only one life right now as our incarnated self, and that we should feel excited to live that. So I think people are looking for help with identifying their passions, and then also, how do you manifest? You might want these things, and there are ways to help you manifest, and so looking for guidance on that is another reason I think people are turning to coaches. And I do think there's a shift, because at my son's school, they have something called Showcase of Learning, where every year they reflect on this, and then in two grades, third grade and sixth grade, they actually give a presentation on the topics of learn with passion, act with courage, change the world. So that's something I really like about his school, where I asked him to reflect on what is he excited about, what is he passionate about, and then how can he use that to help change the world. So I hope there's a shift coming in that.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I'm going to pull out the thread that you brought up, that a lot of times we lean towards other people's or life coaches or mentors because we are searching for our authentic selves. And then you also brought up manifestation. As a life coach, and as someone who I think has been able and is on that path of finding your authentic self, living that, and also learning to manifest, do you have any tips for how you would help someone identify this and or begin to manifest in their life?
Yeah, I think manifestation, there's so much that goes into it before you take action. So it's really slowing down. It's really understanding first, like, what is it that you want? And then you have to go into a lot of things that are blocking you from achieving that. Like, maybe you have limiting beliefs, and you need to look at your beliefs, and you need to spend time reworking that. Like, you need to go into inner child work and shadow work and really dive into where those things come from. And at a, more just day-to-day level of writing your goals down, breaking them into small steps, what can you do in the here and now to put you forward on that path, and then looking to others who have achieved what you want and using them as inspiration, and knowing, like, you also have to believe, right, you're worthy of what you want, and share your gifts with the world, because I do think the universe wants us to share ourselves with others and help the world, and will support you when you start going down that authentic path.
That makes sense. And it makes me think of Lacey Phillips' To Be Magnetic work about expanders, finding people who are doing something or embody some of the things that you want or where you're trying to strive for, and really surrounding yourself with those key people of your circle. Like, we are, what is that quote or the research? The 5 people or 7 people that we're around, we emulate them. That's kind of who we become. So really checking in of who your circle is. And being able to know that we are powerful, we are creators, we are manifestors, we are capable of identifying and going after what we want. And something that I brought up earlier that you do are affirmations. Can you speak a little bit about just what affirmations you do? I think that would be a really interesting and helpful piece. You know, many of us have probably heard of affirmations, but you've really been consistent with yours and show up in your day-to-day with them.
Yes, this is a really integral part of my morning routine. I sometimes do it by myself, I sometimes do it with my family, but basically I just say I am statements. So some of mine that I do is I am present, I am grateful, I am peaceful, I speak with clarity, kindness, and purpose. I take care of my body and my mind. I listen to my intuition. I have a positive attitude. So whatever it is, I don't have a list that I do every day, but I just say things that I am working towards embodying fully, and it helps me. I also clear my energy at the same time. I clear my energy and let drain out anything that's not serving me, which I actually got from you, suggested that to do that for me. And then I protect my energy and I do my affirmations to just really set my day up for who am I trying to be in my day to day? How can I be my best self? And I've noticed such a big impact not only on myself but also my family when they do it with me as well.
That's beautiful and so simple. Thank you for that reminder. And kind of shifting to some mindfulness, I think that is such a supportive tool. Mindfulness is such a big catch-all word. I think, you know, affirmations, meditation, breath work can all kind of fall into this mindfulness and so much more, journaling. And a lot of people will use this looking to enhance and improve their life. How have you seen it work for you? And is this something you find people are open to? And where can someone start?
Yeah, I think it's absolutely super important, mindfulness, because it allows us to be in the present moment. And I feel like this is what we're striving for. It's in the present moment is where we can find contentment. So if you aren't practicing mindfulness, you know, I'm sure some people have heard this fact that 95% of what you do just comes from habitual patterns, your subconscious patterns and habits. So when you start being mindful, you actually start getting to live from your own choices instead of, you know, just continuing a pattern. So I think, you know, at first it's really challenging. When I started meditating, my mind was really frantic and circular. And so it was really interesting for me, though, at the time to look at it and realize I am not those thoughts. I am observing those thoughts. And for me, meditation isn't the goal of clearing your mind from thoughts, but it's witnessing them and also allowing them to go. If you're thinking a thought that's not serving you, whether that means, you know, it's about a problem that you've already decided upon a solution for, and so there's no point in continuing to think about that until it's the time to do that solution. Or maybe it was a comment that didn't sit well with you, and learning to let that go. Like, that's not helping me. I'm not going to hold on to that thought. I'm going to think thoughts from my heart. That's another one of my affirmations. My thoughts focus on my heart. And so the goal, like, you don't have to just be sitting and focusing on your breath when you meditate, which, although I think that is a great practice that everyone can benefit from at times, but you could be doing yoga or you could be gardening. But the goal is to be present and be that witness to your thoughts so that you can start shifting them, because your thoughts is like one of those key things in your manifestation. It's one of the building blocks before you take action. What are you thinking? So allowing yourself to shift that.
Yeah, and remembering you're not your thoughts too, starting to disconnect. This was huge for me because I really struggled with a lot of negative thoughts of feeling unworthy, of feeling like I was just terrible, and it would eat at me. And when I think it was Eckhart Tolle's, one of his first books, I started to have that realization of energy. And so I can just affirm everything Abbie is saying, that sticking with it, but also letting yourself kind of play with it and know and start to realize we are energetic. This mindfulness aspect can bring such deep shifts to us. It can feel hard. You can feel like, well, oh my gosh, how do I even sit here for 5 minutes? My brain is racing. But I promise if you stick with it, it will help. And when you were talking about it, what I was hearing too that might be helpful is if you're really struggling with your thoughts, begin to turn your awareness again, like the thoughts behind the thoughts, or your actual perception into your body and noticing your body space and how maybe your stomach is feeling or your shoulders, and just utilize that as a tool as well, because I think this is something that is still not quite talked about enough, is that energetic aspect of ourselves and how we can actually begin to shift and support and also bring that mindfulness to our body as an energetic being as well. But meditation is such a beautiful, beautiful practice. And I think those are great tips to get started.
Yeah, if you even just sit, like when I first started, I would count my breaths. So I would just count my breaths, and then at some point I would realize I wasn't doing that anymore, or that I was thinking over the counting, and then coming back is one way I try to let go. And absolutely, those feelings come, entangle with your thoughts, and so dropping into how's your body feeling, how's your emotional body feeling, and how are those things connected, and the ability to let go of thoughts. You can also do that with emotion, and you can those are where you can get some really big shifts in physical health, because they're all connected too.
Mm-hmm. That makes sense. And I want to shift a little bit while still talking about how you coach, but more around parenting, because this is something I know me as a parent, I can really struggle with, just feeling overwhelmed or challenged and not having the best strategies, or I don't always have the time to read the parenting books. And you have just this beautiful wealth of knowledge with your degrees and your experience in childhood education. And so as parents, we are often doing our best, and yet many of us feel like we are coming up short. I know I can feel that way. Yesterday was a really, really hard day. I think this is perfect timing to have this conversation. I really struggle around boundaries and giving in to whining emotional pleas. So whether it's around like I'm done eating food, or I want this, or it's bedtime, but then they're like, no, I need to do this first, TV time, whatever. I feel like I'm pretty strong until I'm not, and then it just continues this cycle. So how would you suggest I begin to address this and find solutions to the whining, the pleas, and like stick with, I don't know if it's boundaries or just what I really want to have, which is like an easeful, peaceful time of here's the transitions, here's our routine, and everyone kind of knows what to expect. But we do that, and yet they just can delve into chaos at any moment.
Yes, thank you for sharing your real life. And some tips that I would give to just start is, one, I think it's really important as parents to be really clear with what you want. Like, how much TV time do you want your child to have, or tech time do you want them to have in a week? What are your goals with food for developing lifelong habits with what type of eater they are? So I think it's taking that step back and really thinking through, if you're parenting with a partner, talking with them about this, what are your goals? So, for me at my house, we do tech time once a week, either video games or movies. That just works for us. And then for food habits, like we teach things like, I eat when I'm hungry, but I stop when I'm full, and I eat a variety of foods. We only have treats once in a while. So I come back to like, what is the big picture? Because being really clear on that big picture can help you in the day-to-day. So if you feel like, okay, I've really decided that this is important to me, and this is why, this is the lifelong habit that I'm trying to teach, it's easier to know how to respond in the day to day and to be strong with those boundaries. Like, no, we're not doing tech time today, and that being that. And it will take a while, because if parents have a tendency to give in after a period of time. Well, kids know that, and they will push you and they will try harder for a time until they realize, oh, mom's serious, and eventually that will then end. But expect that maybe for a period of time, they will try even harder with the whining, pleading, those sorts of things. Yeah, so I think after you're clear on that, then you can move forward with, okay, well, how will we handle actual meals or different things like that? And one thing you can do is, in school, we call them social stories, but we develop a story of what will mealtime look like. And you read the story together before it's time to eat. And when people are calm, and, it'd be like, oh, we sit at the table, we try all of our different foods, but just kind of walking them through what your expectations are so that you can have a peaceful dinner where you're able to have conversations with one another. So you can do something like that. And then there's lots of resources. Like there's a book that I really like. It's a Pete the Cat book, and it's called 3-Bite Rule. And it's not just for food, but they are talking, about food, but for other things too, like just trying new things and trying at least 3 times each time you are exposed to that.
And while we're on the food, that is an area that I think we struggle with, to find a stance that feels right, because I agree that I don't want them to overfill themselves. Or I think part of the battle is we give them food and then they'll eat half of it, or they won't eat the veggie parts, but they'll eat the one other part, and then they'll be like, I'm done. But they're not actually full, because then they want a sweet or they want something else. And it's this, again, a battle of sorts, of wits. And it's hard because, again, I don't want to force, if you really are full, I don't want to force it. However, I do want to maintain that we can't just eat pasta and never touch the veggie part or whatever that is. How do you suggest, I mean, just in general, I just don't even know where to start sometimes, because that, I think, is what is the best stance to take. I think you touched on it a little bit, but I really want to have pleasure in our mealtime, and I want them to enjoy food. And, our oldest, Lily, is pretty picky, but I'd say is our battle. She won't try things. She knows what she eats and she'll eat that, which thankfully it's still a good bit. And then Forrest is like, give me everything. I will try it all. And so I can trust, I'd say, when he is like, I'm full, or I don't want any more, but he ate it, because he will try. But Lily, I'd say, is more of our picky, I'm not going to touch it, and then just wants to eat sweets all the time. Help me out.
Yes, absolutely. I struggle with these things too at my home, but I think one thing that can be really helpful is involving your kids in meal planning and meal prep, especially for those picky eaters, because it gets them more excited and invested. Once they've seen the food and they've helped cook it, they're more willing to try it. So you can, bring them to the grocery store, have them pick out vegetables that, okay, well, you pick out 3 vegetables. What are you wanting to try? And then saying, oh, well, what can we cook with this? Look up recipes. And, obviously kids have different interest levels in this. My son isn't super excited to look at cookbooks or cook, but he does sometimes help us out. And we're going to work this year he packs his own snacks, and then he's going to help us with 1 meal a week cooking that, and also help with the meal planning, and picking out things at the grocery store. So I think that's one great step, to just involve them more, because then they get more excited. And also to talk to them about their body, and some kids are really interested in that too. My son is really interested in the human body, and what is digestion, how does that work, what do we need? We need fiber, or we need different things, and thinking about that for when they get to an age around 5, 6, 7, where they can start really thinking about those concepts. So those are some things to just bring more background. And then, you can't obviously force a kid to eat something, but we really praise and get excited with that 3-bite rule. Because also, something not everyone might know, but it can take up to 10 times of trying something, or even more, to start enjoying that taste. So something I say to kids is, your taste buds are surprised the first time you try something new, right? didn't have that flavor, and they're like, what is that? And so continuing to try it and continuing to offer those are important, and at least encouraging them to try a few bites every time. And if they're not really ready to actually put it in their mouth, like to smell it, to touch it, to lick it, those are okay things to do on the way to trying new foods. And then when they do try foods, don't be like, did you like it? I feel like that is, so many people are wanting to know, like, was it good? Because again, like, most likely it's going to be a new flavor that they're not really sure what they think of. So you can say, like, what was it like? Was it crunchy? Was it creamy? Was it sour? Like, more describing it, and not putting like value on that, is something you can do. So yeah, there's lots of ways you can go. And I think, what's tricky about kids too is something might be working for a while and then they change, and then you have to, try a different strategy, but also being consistent with trying these for long periods of times, you will see shifts and growth with what kids are willing to eat.
That's really helpful. And as I reflect, I think a lot of this for my struggle is having to almost reparent my own self around the strategies of even how I deal with food, because I think a lot of us as parents, we just have what we grew up with. And a lot of it was, for me, you set the table, you finish all your food, period, and I don't care if you like it or not, like, you have to eat it. And it can be this huge fussy issue. And I was someone who really struggled with understanding what health was. I think even knowing that we are starting these habits so young, I like that your idea of having variety, and just even knowing that if we cooked it and we made it, but they just lick it and that's enough, and they're like, that's all I want. Can we as parents be okay with that? I think that's, like, when I think about it, there's this piece of, am I wasting food? Or, I cooked you this and this is what you're going to eat. Like, I want you to try and you need this because it's healthy, But can we bring in a little bit more gentleness, softness with our eating habits, and how we have, I guess it's the expectations that we have for children. I don't feel, at least mine, when I'm reflecting here, are probably not always best, because I don't know if I've taken the time to really say what and how do I even look at food. All I think of to my childhood, and it was just a lot of painful moments. And while I've tried to step away from that, I think hearing you talk about this, it's like mind-blowing in the sense of it's really rather simple, but I'm the one having to make the changes of how I'm looking at food and what my expectations are, not so much them, to help make supportive, healthy eaters in a way.
Yes, absolutely. I think it does come back to our eating habits, and we have a lot of those expectations from our childhood. And obviously we want our kids to eat what we cooked, and that is the ultimate goal, is that eventually you wouldn't have to, give your one kid something different than your another, what you made for yourself. And so I think with having strong boundaries with that, like, this is what dinner is. If you're feeling hungry afterwards, like, being really strong on, like, there won't be snacks, or those sorts of things. Not that you can't offer your child snacks. And if you have a really picky eater, having like that backup plan of like, okay, well, if you didn't eat your dinner, then you can have a banana, or you can have an apple, like a safe food for them that they always like, but that is also healthy, so that, and then knowing like, well, I can just use this as leftovers and I can have this or offer this, but not giving that child an out, with they end up getting sweets. And for me, sugar is, it just really shocks me, because sugar is an addictive substance, and we don't like to give our children other addictive substances, but sugar is this one that I feel like is overlooked, and that is so addictive for them, and they do want that. It is yummy and tasty, and their body craves it. And so that's where really trying to teach them those boundaries and limits when it comes to sugar and when it comes to tech, because tech is also addictive. It releases dopamine in your brain, and so it's natural that kids want those things, and then us as our parents have to sit and think, well, how can I teach them to have healthy boundaries with that? So knowing like, yeah, it's okay that if your child just licks food, but then they also have to know, okay, I'm not going to get like ice cream or something like that afterwards, but also not treating treats like, first if you eat, then you get this treat. Because if you flipped it, like, first if you eat your ice cream, then you get carrots. Like, you want the carrots, you want that. It's not like an if then. It's like we can have ice cream once in a while. That is okay. But for the most part, we're eating our healthy foods or different things like that.
That's really helpful. Thank you for breaking that down. And something else that I think you see so much value in as you've thought about opening a forest school, a preschool, and just are a lover of nature, as am I. How does nature play into raising healthy families and children, especially in this day and age?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think nature is another one of those mediums that helps us return to the present moment, like mindfulness. We all need time in nature, and kids need time in nature to connect and feel that connection with the earth, and they're only going to want to protect the earth if they've had that time in nature where they really value that. So I think it's so important, and every child deserves time to be with the earth in its natural state. Beyond that, it grounds us and helps us regulate. It really helps us stay regulated in our emotions. And like I was saying with tech, and getting that instant dopamine hit, it's so different because we're getting this instant gratification, but that can be really just regulating to our bodies. And so the earth helps us ground. And something that I always say, like, I always try to say, it's a beautiful day, no matter the weather, because it's always a beautiful day. And we always say at our house, like, every day is a great time to play outside as long as you have the right clothes, right? And you have your rain gear, you have your snow clothes. But just really, as parents, I think it's so important how we show kids by actually doing that, like going outside in the snow and the rain. Yeah, I think it's so important to have that time in nature.
And do you think outdoor play is enough, or do you see that there should be more? I think outdoor play is a great thing to strive for and start with, and letting there be free play, all of that. But I'm thinking more along the lines of, how do we create a generation that respects the earth, that sees and values it as, this is our container, this is our life, and the animals and the beings and the plants are a part of this. And I think I'm just so curious if we can take this a little deeper of, how do we begin to cultivate that? I think, like you said, a lot of it is us as parents showing and sharing our own, hopefully, love for nature, or let's go out and do a hike or camp or fish, or look and see how we are a part of this, grow a garden. I'm curious if you have any thoughts or what you do with your own son with that.
Yes, I think when you look at history too, right? Humans spent so much more of their time outside, and just in the recent past where we spend more of our day inside. So getting in tune with those natural rhythms. Yeah, and I think, start wherever you're at. If you, just get outside once a day, or you take chunks of time to enjoy on the weekend. Yeah, my ultimate goal is to have a forest preschool, and I think just being able to be at one with the earth, and knowing, like, when you have that time, you can see that every animal, every plant has that part, and also sharing about that, like, if these bees weren't here, what would happen, or how do we keep our water sources clean. I think as a society, we are having a lot of issues with the natural earth and clean water and all of those sorts of things. And so it's just so important to allow kids those positive experiences, and to then talk about the impacts of, like, if these things aren't here, how will that impact humans. And so, yeah, I think not only does getting in nature and having time away from tech, it connects back to learning about our passions. We have to have space from tech to space to, and this is where something with my son, he really is always like, well, what are we doing next? So he has a hard time just not having his time filled, but they need that time where they get bored or they aren't sure what to do, because it allows them to discover, oh, well, what is my next interest? What am I excited about? And, for him, he really turns to doing a lot of reading and drawing, and as he got older, creative writing. But we try to do some of those things outside too, like we read in the hammock. He's always excited to go boulder on rocks and play outside in those ways. And he might not initially want to go like, oh, we're gonna go to the creek. He's just has a hard time with transitions in general. But then once we went to the creek last week, he didn't want to leave and was so happy playing in the sand. And once he's there, he's just so content and calm, and providing more of that, is something that I need to still do, try to get out as much as I can, because knowing that regulates not only him, but our whole family. So
This is a really big, full question that I think could be a whole episode, but how do we begin to support our children to be whole, happy kids?
Yes, absolutely. And I think to be whole and happy, we need to be regulated. And so we've been talking a little bit about that with the earth, helping regulate us, but really teaching them those regulation strategies. How can they calm themselves down when they're feeling big feelings? How can they solve problems, maybe with materials, but with other people too? And how do they use conflict resolution skills? Those are such important strategies to have. So really focusing on their social emotional development and allowing them to know like what works for me to regulate. Maybe I need some time to myself. Maybe I need to draw. Maybe I need to jump on the trampoline. There's so many different ways that we can help regulate. So that is one thing. Another thing that I feel like is really important is helping your kids find their passions. And so exposing them to many topics and many different things, and seeing what they do in their free time, and helping them then dive into that deeper. So when you observe, oh, my child really likes to build or do things with hammers and do tools, and then giving them more opportunities to build things. Just being an observer and a guide for them of, I see you and let's dive into this. And, things shift as they grow. But my son really loves to play with language. And so this year we offered him an opportunity to learn a language, and we signed him up for Duolingo, and just trying to help them dive further into their passions. And then my last thing to be whole, happy kids is have them help with chores and things around the house. I feel like this is so important, and it's something that is hard, I think, for a lot of families, because they're so busy and kids go to school and they go to activities and there's just not that much time. And it's often easier as a parent to just do it yourself because it takes more time to teach your kids how to do things. But when you have kids help out around the house, they have that sense of purpose, and they have the assurance that they are capable, that they can do those things. And obviously it's so important to teach them life skills and actually have them help you out as they get older and better at doing things. So those would be my 3 biggest things.
Those are awesome. And it makes me just reflect. It's really empowerment. How do we empower our kids to know what their passions are, to feel like they're a part of the family, that they're capable and independent? And that's what we were talking a little bit before we started recording, was I'm noticing this struggle with my oldest of, I think a lot of it is coming down to she's getting to a point where she's like independent, but she also is trying to find her place within the family with now having 2 younger brothers. And like you said, it's so easy to do things for them. As parents, we are always doing everything for them. And so we're doing and we're tired. And then it's easy to say, okay, let's all just watch a movie and we'll hang out together. That's our us time. But I'm having this deep reflection and realization that I need to do things with them. That is, I think, like everything you just said is such a key point of our days are full, whether kids go to school, we're at work, there's things to go do and be, but then what are those foundational aspects where you show up and you sit and you look, like you said, you see your kid, you see what lights them up, and then you give opportunities to help them. That makes so much sense. And I hope that more and more we as parents and society starts to have a better grasp on that. I think we talk about it a lot, but I don't think everything is set up to the school system, all that. I mean, that's a whole nother piece itself to really support this aspect. So how I think reflecting just, it's so important that we as parents have these conversations and begin to bring that into our awareness, that we are really the ones cultivating our children, giving them that foundation. We set them up or allow them to have the future failure, unfortunately, just by what we do. And while that can feel really heavy, I think knowing it's light, it's simple. Everything you said, it's like, it's not that hard to do. It's partly just knowing what to do and having the awareness. So awesome. Those are great. And I'm really excited. Let's dive into all things astrology now. And so shifting to this, can you talk about what is astrology? I think we all know like our sun sign now, especially if you're listening to this, and maybe more, but there's just, I think, so much there. And I'd love to hear what drew you to learning about this system and now reading charts as well.
Yes, so this is so fun for me. How I would define astrology is it's a language of metaphors written in sacred geometry of the celestial bodies, of where they're located at your birth and then currently in the present moment in the sky. So your natal chart tells you a lot about like your predisposed tendencies and provides you information with what is the path in your life? What is your life purpose? And then transits tell you about timing. So where the planets are currently in the sky interact with your natal planet placements. And so what is going on in your life right now? What's being more emphasized in the present moment? There might be certain planets that are getting activated, or certain areas of your chart. So your chart is broken into houses, and the houses represent different like areas of life, and so there might be more of a focus in one area. So yeah, I got into this because I followed my interests and my passions, and as I did, it resonated with me and really helped me understand myself better, and just also gave me that affirmation of like, oh, this makes so much sense. Like when I started astrology, I wasn't even sure if I really believed in astrology, but after going through it time and time again, it's so relatable to others and resonates with what is going on currently in the energy. And I think, again, as it ties back to coaching, whatever is going to come up for you in your life is coming up for you, and those energies might come up from an astrological level, and then we are able to take what's coming up and really be intentional with how we use that energy. So in astrology, I feel like sometimes people can get really worried about certain placements, like, oh, I'm having a Pluto transit, or I'm having, my Saturn returns, or different things. And yes, there will be challenges in certain aspects, but there's nothing inherently good or bad, and all energy is on a spectrum, and you can have this a positive manifestation of really anything in your chart. So
if someone is looking at their chart or wanting to learn how they can help themselves, maybe know what maybe a passion or a career field could be, how and or what would you look at in someone's astrology chart to help show maybe where they are right now, and or maybe the energetic personality that they might identify with or inspire them to look at one thing or another, or just even know like, oh, these are some of my strong traits?
Yeah, so when you look at career and that area, so there's a few different things you could look at. One thing that I like to start with is I like to look at the north node, because their north node is what direction are we going in this life. I really feel like it has a lot to do with our dharma and our purpose, but it often, develops a little later in our life, and as we're striving towards that and having new experiences that bring us into that part of our chart. So another area you can look at is your 10th house, which is career. So what sign and planets are in that house can give you information. So if your Mercury is in your 10th house, you would want to use your voice or your mind and do a lot of mental work. That would be good for you. You can also look, so there's another angle called the MC, which is often called the career angle, but it's like the most public part of your chart. So that can be in your 10th house, but it's sometimes in a different house near the 10th house. So that can give you a little bit more information about it. So like if it's in the 11th house, the 11th house is groups and community. So you might be doing something that's more involved on a community level. Whereas if your MC is in the 8th house is a more private house. You might work more on your own, or you might work in one-on-one relationships, really diving into the internal world more. And my MC is in my 9th house, and it centers around the 9th house of big topics of faith, spirituality, travel, beliefs. So it just gives you a little bit more information. And then last, you could look at your 5th house, which is your creativity, and even your Mars, like how do you take action. So there's so many things that go into just one piece, but it's really exciting when you look at it because you can get really inspired and excited.
I love that. I know you've told me all this. I'm going to have to look and see what mine are in as well. And I also want you to touch a little bit about what a Saturn return is. I just went through mine. You touched a bit about it in your story of you having your aunt pass during your Saturn return, and my father passed during my Saturn return. And can you just explain briefly what is a Saturn return, and or how will that possibly affect us when it comes, all the things?
Yeah, so a Saturn return happens multiple times. It can happen multiple times in your lifetime. It's when Saturn comes back to its natal placement in your chart. So, say my Saturn was in Sagittarius. So, it takes between 27 to 30 years to get back to that same house placement, because Saturn's a slow moving planet. So the Saturn return is simply when Saturn returns to that home sign that it was in when you were born. Saturn returns can present in so many different ways for different individuals, but it's a really time of growing up and maturing. Saturn in the chart represents responsibility and hard work, and Saturn says no a lot, which is something. So different things will start happening. I think it's one of the first times where your life is really pointing you, if it starts saying no to you in certain areas of your life, or it uses experiences to help you wake up to what your path is, what your path forward is, and just maturing as a person. And Saturn returns can happen in many different ways. If you have a night chart, which is when the sun was below the horizon when you were born, Saturn returns can, they say, be a little more challenging than if you have a day chart. But either way, a Saturn return in a sun chart might just mean you have to put in a lot of hard work in this area of your life, and you have a lot of challenges come up with that. But if you persevere, and then really wonderful things can happen. I have a night chart, and so my Saturn return was just a lot of things happened, but I think it's the same thing. It's this vehicle for transformation, and then you will have one a little later on in your life too, a little before 60. And if you are using those opportunities when Saturn comes back into that house to grow and expand and move forward on your path, I think things go more smoothly than if you are really resistant to what's happening during that time.
That's super helpful. Yes. And I just, like I said, exited mine. And mine was, I think, a culmination of both of challenges, of just uncoverings. That's when we traveled. But like it was not easy. We were really compressed. We had a lot of grief and death and also different things of what do we want in life that we had to look at. But then I came out of my Saturn return and I had this idea for this podcast, and here we are. And I hope there's a lot of beautiful things that will come. But thank you for sharing that. I don't want to say it's like the end all be all, but it's such an important piece, I think, to know. And or if you've already passed your Saturn return, to reflect on maybe back what was happening in that time of your life, to just learn and know maybe what will come back around when you're nearing 62 in your next Saturn return regarding themes and such. But knowing this, astrology is so deep and vast, and just hearing you talk, you are obviously so well versed in this. How does one such as myself, who has a little bit of knowledge around astrology but not a lot, help ourselves to implement it in our daily lives? I know I use the app CoStar, and I think there's some other apps out there, and I've looked, and you've read my chart, which has been so helpful. Highly recommend Abbie's readings. But how do we start to bring this and this knowledge into our day-to-day?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's knowing your energy more, and so really diving into, I mean, a great place where you can just start, right, is your sun sign, your moon sign, your rising sign, and learning a little bit more about those. But I think when you look at your dominant energies, like, do you have fire, air, water, earth? What is dominant? And then how does that express? Is that in a cardinal, a fixed, or a mutable fashion? So, it's going to take some learning and research, but if you can get a good understanding of what those energies are for you, you're able to understand yourself so much better. So I was hearing somebody talk about New Year's resolutions, and often with the New Year's resolution, it's really presented in what we would consider this like fixed earth mindset of like doing the same thing, having this consistent routine, and that just doesn't work for some people who might have a different type of energy. So understanding your energy can then help you understand, well, how do I best manifest, and how do those sorts of things work for me? So, and then like we were talking about with Saturn, like you might not be in your Saturn returns, but Saturn is at a house in your chart, and Saturn is there for around 3 years typically. So just looking at where is Saturn, where is Jupiter, what does that mean for this period of time? Jupiter is in a house for a year. So it really gives a flavor of what is this time period going to be like. And it's really interesting too with kids at school, knowing that each grade that comes in, like they typically have their Jupiter and Saturn in the same place, and like how does that reflect them as this group of individuals. But you can get some themes from that. And then there's some other strategies in astrology where you can look at like what house beyond Saturn and Jupiter is dominant that year, and just kind of coming up with yearly themes of what planets are activated. So I mean, I think if you really want to dive into that, it might be helpful to have somebody who understands this to go over it with you. But you definitely, there's so many resources where you can look and learn about the planets and the signs and all of that to get an understanding. But it definitely can just give you affirmation in your daily life and allow you to understand, like, to go back to that, like, why am I going through this, and looking at that, and you can see what's going on, and then just allowing you to use your energy in a more easeful way.
Super helpful. And also it's so interesting, like you touched on, that each kind of small generation of years has similarities. And so knowing there's like a collective energy that we're all feeling, but then there's like these subsets of all of us that just went through our Saturn return were Saturn in Aquarius, and then the new group Saturn in Pisces. And so knowing that, yeah, like the flavors and the different things that we're all kind of working on, or how it's affecting us, can both be collective, but then also very individual. But there's so much there, and it's so fascinating as I've learned, and you've helped me explore this more, just begin to understand myself a little better, understand what and why I'm here and all those things. So super helpful. I'm excited to dive even deeper now because you are about to highlight how as parents and as individuals, we're still people, even though we're parents, can really look at astrology and understand how we help support our children, help support ourselves and our family unit. So we are going to dive into a little bit about my youngest son, Stone's birth chart. So you can help me better understand him and empower me as a parent. And I'm going to let you kind of take it away to help just share everything and highlight how this can work for all you other parents.
Yes, I'm so excited. Okay, so Stone, when I look at someone's chart, I start with their sun, moon, and rising sign. So he is a Virgo sun, so that is an earth sign, a mutable earth sign, and that is in his 5th house, which is the sign of creativity, of bringing new things to life and play. And then he is a Taurus rising, which is another earth sign, and Uranus is close to his ascendant, so it's just in the 12th house right before he has a 20-degree rising. And then he is a Cancer moon, and you are a Cancer sun, and we were kind of chatting about that sometimes in families you might see similar signs or be represented, and I find that can happen. And so he's a Cancer moon. So we see earth and water in that. And I did this really fun thing where I look at all of the planets in the chart and I put them in, are they a fire, air, earth, or water? And then the other way we categorize signs are either cardinal, fixed, or mutable. Fixed being that sign that really likes consistency. They like to do the same thing, have the same foods, and they'll really persevere and work hard. And then cardinal loves to start projects and start things. And mutable is very adaptable and flexible and can really shift their energy depending on different things. So I put all of his planets into this little graphic to help me figure out what's most dominant. And the most dominant energy for Stone is that he's a fixed earth energy. So we can see he has a lot of that earth with his Virgo sun and Taurus rising. And to do this, I did put more emphasis on certain planets because outer planets like Uranus, Neptune, Pluto, again, like they'll be the same generationally for the whole population. So I rated them a little less, not that they don't impact you, but they're ranked less than like your sun and moon and rising. So he has this fixed earth energy, and so earth energy, he's relating to the world with his physical body first. Mm-hmm. So we have all of those energies in us, and the other bodies are your emotional body, your mental body, and your spiritual body. But he will relate most primarily with his physical body. So he will like to do things with his body, have hands-on learning, and then he will probably generally like routines and consistency, those sorts of things. And with this, just as a disclaimer, like there's so many ways certain energies can manifest, but that would be a common manifestation of that energy. And then other energy that's the secondary energy for him that he still has, but not as strongly as fixed earth, is cardinal, air, and water. So that water with his moon sign, it's also his south node and Neptune. And then air, he has this Mercury, Saturn, his MC, his career angle, and his Mars. So he does have energy with his mental and emotional body and starting things with that. And then his least present energy is fire. So he has a lot less fire. He had only 3. So he has Jupiter and Chiron in a fire sign. So he doesn't have that much fire energy. But what's interesting, I've noticed, is that when you are lacking in one energy, you often have people in your life that fill that role. And so your other son, Forrest, is a Sagittarius and has more fire energy. And because for Stone's chart, he has that in his 7th house, which is like other, one-on-one relationships. But like as a child too, it might be like he has that fire energy being represented by Forest, and Lily is a Leo rising as well. So when you think about that for his energy, though, like, make sure that he's using his physical body and he will express like that. And he might just need help with transitions and learning to like be more adaptable and those sorts of things.
Yeah, that would be my question is, how do we support both ourselves and when knowing that stone has that lack of fire and that kind of missing element in a way compared to the others? How do, as parents, we help him? You said transitions could be something that we have to help support, but how do I help even like teach him? This is something you probably need to have a little bit more emphasis on to help balance yourself out.
Yeah, so that's like our spiritual body, and it would just be giving him practices. How does he connect to that? Does with through that meditation and mindfulness that might not be something that just comes as naturally for him. So providing opportunities and guidance in that area. And, I would say, like, wait and see what starts presenting. Maybe he'll need extra support with transitions or maybe not, but just knowing that, and then as you see your child develop and then be like, oh, okay, maybe this is manifesting due to this, and then you look further at the time. I also looked at his most important aspects in his chart. So this is diving a little deeper into how the planets are interacting with each other. So we know he has all that earth energy. He has an earth trine, which means he just has planets in all the 3 earth signs. So that is why that comes so naturally. It will come really naturally to him because the energy is just flowing. And people with trines, an elemental trine, don't necessarily know that it's like kind of like a superpower for them. They might think, oh, everybody experiences the world like this, but it's this natural flow of that element. So it just flows really naturally. Something that he has in his chart is a cardinal T-square. So this is in the cardinal signs, and a T-square literally looks like a triangle in the chart where there's a planet who's being squared from both sides. So there's like a 90-degree angle going to this planet, and then the two other planets are opposing each other at 180 degrees. So it creates this triangle. And T-squares can be a real powerful energy because, they get activated quite a bit as planets orbit around. So a little bit more about his T-square. It involves his moon as the focal planet, which is the planet being squared from both sides. And then it involves Jupiter and Mercury in the oppositions. This will just play into his moon is going to be getting information all the time from Mercury and Jupiter. Okay. It's just like with that trine, but it's like the moon hears what's going on with Mercury and Jupiter, and Mercury and Jupiter are having a hard time coming into balance with each other. But one thing that I noted with these 2 planets, these 2 planets get along pretty well, and they're both more active conscious planets. So I do think, like with any T-square, you can find a way to balance the energies, but you're going to get conflicting messages. Like Jupiter might be saying one thing and Mercury saying another thing, and your moon is trying to interpret that and deal with that, and the moon then has its own point of view too. So since the squares to the moon, it interferes with like the natural constructive expression of the planet due to the conflict between Jupiter and Mercury. And with his, it's really interesting. Other planets are tied in by conjunction. So Jupiter has this wide orb to Chiron and Neptune, and then Mercury has a wide orb to the Sun and Venus, and the moon itself is right next to Phallus. So there's a lot coming into play, but for him, it might be worthwhile to teach him how to ask for what he needs, how to share his feelings in a healthy way, because this moon is just going to have a harder time maybe expressing itself freely, and it might like have all this powerful energy coming into it. And so it just might need some support with how do I express, because the moon is your sense of security and also your emotional needs and just your instincts in a sense. So that T-square, when you look at the triangle, there's an empty space on the other side where the other side of the triangle would be. And that empty space can also give you a lot of information on how do you balance out that energy. So his is in his 8th house, which is this private energy of intimacy, grief, all of those sorts of things, transformation. And so you might just also work with him on the ways to develop intimacy with those he's closest with, taking other people's perspectives, being able to compromise and solve problems and those sorts of things. And even like possibly like how do you use shared resources with other people. So yeah, I think just as he continues to grow, looking at that, his emotional body and how is that developing, and just providing him strategies to continue that development in a healthy way.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. And is there anything, I guess, in my chart that would help me in, I don't even know, in parenthood, or just as you relate and look at stones? I mean, how as a parent do I understand myself and utilize astrology to better myself and my elements, so then I can also show up and help my kids with theirs?
Yeah, so one place you can look, so children in the chart is in the 5th house, and then your home is in the 4th house. But if you go look at your 5th house, it is half and half Capricorn and Aquarius. And so that might tell me like you might try some traditional ways of parenting, but then you ultimately, like moving to Aquarius, want to create your own new ways of parenting too. So you might look at what is that 5th house, what is the sign of that 5th house, because it can give you some insight into how you might parent. So you have like an earth air energy there, and then you also have your moon in that house, moon and Saturn, which they're conjunct in that house. So yeah, that energy probably plays in a lot to your parenting. Saturn sitting on your moon. So Saturn, as you developed in your emotional life, might have felt like this kind of found that hard to express emotionally or do those sorts of things. So your moon and Saturn is there, and how that relates to you as a parent is just also being able to share what you've learned. But yeah, with that moon there, like, you know, you have so much love and this desire to nourish and take care of your children. So there are lots of other places we could touch on too. But one thing that I did found is interesting. So as with stones, I did the dominant energy of everyone in the family, and you have the same dominant energy as stone. You are also a fixed earth dominant energy. So you guys have that in common, and the rest of your family has different things, but you also have least fire. So your and Stone's charts have some similarities. What's interesting is that your husband Steven, his dominant energy is cardinal fire. So he is bringing a lot of that fire into your family, and often I notice with partners that we complement each other like that. And then your other 2 kids, Lily is a mutable air dominance, and Forrest is a mutable water dominance. So, you know, I would expect that Lily is just more adaptable to different environments and situations, and she's able to talk to lots of people, and you know, she enjoys playing with ideas and all of those sorts of things. Whereas Forrest is also maybe adaptable, but he really approaches the world with his emotional body. Yeah, I actually have the same one as Forrest too. I'm a mutable water. So
okay, I almost think Forrest seems very physical, but it's almost, I think he has a hard time being in his body sometimes. I think he like has a hard time processing, or he feels all this, and then how do I get it out or relate or whatever that is. So I'll have to look at that. But that's so fascinating. And I almost can see, so fire would be, you said it's related to spirituality, because air is mental body, right? Mm-hmm. Water is emotional. Fire is spirituality. Like, how does that show
your
up?
spiritual body. So
your spiritual body, okay.
Yeah, I think so. as I'm a Sagittarius, I have this, it's like that transformation, that connection to, not just, I guess, spirit, but like ideas that come in at the ether. Like you think of it as like that most outer layer of your aura and what is coming in there, and possibly just like knowing things. The intuition comes in your emotional body too, but like more related to possibly ideas, or you just have this natural way of being able to help others transform and like see themselves. I do think fire, it can be kind of the most tricky to grasp, because it is this almost like there's less words to describe it in that sense, because it is that furthest out from our physical body. Yeah.
Yeah, and I bring it up because I almost feel like I do that more than Steven does in a way. So this is really interesting to me. Is there any reasons or somewhere in your chart where like maybe you have a dominant element, but it is possibly, I know you've talked to me before about the 12th house where it can be unconscious or it's not, doesn't quite show up, but I'm curious if you've seen that present where someone isn't really expressing their most dominant element, or why would that be?
Yeah, so what's interesting about Steven's chart, and I hope he doesn't mind me sharing,
Yes.
but his fire is in his 4th, 8th, and 12th house for the most part. So his rising sign is Leo, but it's the literally last degree of Leo. And so how I look at house systems, that would put the majority of that house in the 12th. So as you're saying, the 12th house is, these houses are more internal. So your 4th house is like your home, your private life, and you might not share that with the outer world as much. And then your 8th house, where he has his sun and his Mercury, and the 8th house, that's again this like internal, intimate part of yourself that you're not always sharing with others. Then when you get to your 12th house, he also has Jupiter in his 12th house. That can be so subconscious. Like sometimes they even say planets in your 12th house, the energy is kind of taken in a sense until you bring it back to consciousness. So there's definitely so much work you can do around 12th house planets and energies, because you do need to bring those to consciousness to be able to access them more. So yeah, that is really interesting that turned to be his dominant. And I'm wondering if you see his secondary more often. So he's a fixed water and earth secondary, and he has very low mutable air. So like his mental and his flexibility might be more challenging for him, that doesn't come as naturally. But the fixed water and earth, so he might be really, you have fixed earth as dominant, and that's his secondary, and with water too. But so the routines, the day-to-day, because he does have Virgo in his 1st house. So yes, there's just, it's so hard to put a chart into this simple thing, because really, even though there are commonalities on a collective level and things like that, but there's so much going into your one specific chart that make you this unique energy. And even like identical twins, I'm really interested in that topic and want to dive more into that, because I think that's one thing like people have mentioned, like, oh, well, identical twins, if they express differently, their charts are so similar, but just those energies can play out in many ways as well. So
yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And I want to say like Steven definitely has some of those qualities. It's just when you described it, I was kind of like, that's really interesting. That's not, I think, something that stands out hugely. But is there anything else that you'd want to touch on about just how astrology and family systems can be supportive to understand? And what would you recommend, I guess? Like for me, I feel like this is like a daily practice I should do, or every month, like check in what's happening. Just how do we integrate this a little bit more into our lives and utilize it?
I mean, I think, so with families, like you do see that repetition, like Steven is a Leo rising and so is Lily. And then also Steven I'm looking at his chart right now, like he has some Taurus energy with his MC and Venus, and that got brought into Stone's chart as his ascendant. So I think that we're seeing the different ways, because it depends on the planet that's in that house too, right, of how that might express. So it is interesting to just kind of look through those patterns, and we could do a deep dive more into that in the future. But for the day-to-day, it's important to know, like, oh, where is the sun? And what does that mean? Like right now the sun is in Cancer, and depending on where that is in your chart, like for me, that's my first house. Like I might have a focus on my body because the first house has to do with your physical body. Or for you, I think yours is in the 11th, your sun in the 11th, so community. And that might help you decide on like, oh, what is the focus of it's in the 10th, 11th. So career and community, what might be a focus for the month there. And then just any aspects that are coming up, like something that's happening is the nodes are changing signs, and they'll go into Libra and Aries here in a few days. And when they do that, they're going to have a square to Pluto. So some of those things are really important to just be aware of, because the energy, it's a big energetic shift. And it can tie back. We had an eclipse at 29 degrees Aries in the spring. And so it will even bring up some things that were happening back at that time, because the energies, they don't just play out in a day. Like some energies will linger on for a long period of time as different planets go over that same spot. So it's definitely, there's so much complexity, but there's simple things that you can also just look at and notice, like, oh, I'm having this come up for me, and then like kind of seeing and looking what's going on with the planets.
Yeah, that's helpful. And before we move to the wild heart questions to close, I have one more really big question probably, but it popped into my head of the new moon and the full moon. I feel like this is a conversation that has come up so widely into the public as well. And my daughter often, especially around the full moon, will say, and not during the day, but like the day after, like my emotions, I can feel it, what is happening. Can you just speak to like what is the full moon, new moon, if you can, and how those might affect us?
Yeah, so the moon is the fastest moving planet in the chart, and so that's why, the moon is governing your emotions. Your emotions can change so much on the day-to-day because the moon only spends 2.5 days or so in a sign, so there will be a lot of shifts depending on who the moon's interacting with and what sign it is in your chart. And so, new moons and full moons happen often, but they are like these important beginnings and closures, and just that almost like a monthly theme. And so it's really dependent, because we just had a switch with the moon where we're having the full moon before the new moon in that sign. So we just had a switch in that, where sometimes we have the new moon before the full moon. And so all of that can kind of impact like what is going on with the moon and what the moon is doing. So, people like to generally say like new moons are about beginnings and full moons are about bringing something to a close. But I think it's a little more complex than that. But there are definitely these powerful energies where the sun and the moon are making these connections, right? And a new moon, they're conjunct, and in a full moon, they're in an opposition. So it's like they're having this time to connect with one another. And moons, it can bring to light things that might have been hidden more in the darkness. I use them as times to manifest too. The moons, I often write moon wishes and use those energies to help manifest and just reflect on what's going on. But I would say every moon is different depending on the aspects it's making in the chart. So
okay, that was a helpful overview. So diving into these wild heart questions, with you being on the Live Wildly podcast, how would you say you live wildly?
Yeah, and I think I've touched on this throughout the talk, but I really feel like I live wildly by following my passions, by seeing where my interests lie and just following that. And I think that also ties to the fire in my chart, but like just really going with the flow of what is speaking to me, what am I excited about, and that really lights up my life. And when I'm not doing that and I'm just doing the day to day, the things I need to get done, I really lose the light or the excitement of following those things that I love. So
That makes sense. What's your sun sign?
I'm a Sagittarius sun.
I can never remember.
Yes.
Sagittarius sun, Virgo moon. What is your rising?
Cancer.
Cancer.
But yeah, I have a big stellium in Sagittarius, so I have a lot of planets there too. So yeah.
Yeah, I was curious. Okay. Who or what inspires you?
New experiences and new information really inspire me. I love to learn, and I really get excited when I learn something that might give me a new belief or a new thing to try. So that inspires me. And because of that too, I'm really inspired by just like being my best self, like continuing to grow as a person, and then like living in integrity with what I believe or what I've chosen. So I feel like living like my higher self inspires me in a way, and trying to be that as much as I can in my day to day.
That's beautiful. And it can be hard, right? I think identifying and really doing it, but that's a great mindset to have as you undertake life, is continuing to grow and thrive. That's lovely. And what is an important habit or tool you've integrated into your life that you just can't live without?
Yeah, so I think we talked about both of these, and my one is my morning affirmations. That is so important for setting my day. And also, I've really become attached to my moon wishes. I also set out moon water during the full moon and new moon, and then I drink the water as I talk through my wishes. So it's a fun ritual that I'm doing. And then yeah, just getting out in nature as much as I can, taking walks, doing those sorts of things also really just help me stay grounded.
Yeah, you've turned me on to the moon water. I try to remember to do that each time, and I love it. I think it's so fun and such a nice practice to actually commune. Like, it gives you a moment and a tangible thing to say, I'm going to connect, I'm going to set this out, and then just letting the energies soak in the water is so fun. So thank you for sharing that too with me, and now all the listeners too. Highly recommend it. And if you could tell us about your current offerings and how people can work with you.
Yeah, absolutely. So I offer astrology readings, and I also offer coaching. And this can be in individuals or groups. It can be in business or in personal life, families. So yeah, I really want to work with people to help them understand themselves and their energy, and to start taking steps on manifesting the life that they truly want and desire. So if you want to connect with me, you can find me on my website. And yeah, I'd be really excited to work with you.
Thank you, Abbie. All of her information will be linked in the show notes. And I just want to say thank you for being my friend, for taking this time to share all your wisdom. I think this kind of covered so much. So it was a really deep, amazing episode. And again, thank you. You have so much wisdom to share. And I highly recommend her if you are interested in astrology, coaching, parenting. She really just has a wealth of knowledge. So you're amazing. I appreciate you.
Thank you so much, Olivia.
Thank you. Thank you so much for listening to the Live Wildly podcast. If you enjoyed this episode, please rate and review the podcast on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. It goes a long way to helping gain new listeners and fills my heart to see your reviews every time it comes through. It just keeps me inspired and going on this journey. And if you'd like to learn more or follow Olivia further, you can check me out at www.olivia-ashley.com. And just there's a lot there that you can check out, and you can learn more about the podcast episodes. You can also follow along on Instagram at Wildly Olivia or at Live Wildly Podcast. So thank you so much for tuning in. I appreciate all of you listeners, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. Thanks again.